Okay, welcome. I'd like to call this, or actually, are you okay. Mr. Frost, can you lead us in the pledge?
Thank you, Madam President. Please join us for the pledge of allegiance.
If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you're muting your computer.
We can hear feedback.
It's delayed, so.
Yeah, so if you are watching on YouTube, if you could mute your YouTube or whatever you're watching so that we're not getting feedback. Okay.
Processes and verify that they were being followed. There was no apparent action on this, and repeated requests for follow-up were ignored. I was grateful to see a discussion about this come to the board in February 2022, but it must be asked, why did it take 17 months for these concerns, which were validated numerous times by various KSD leaders, to be publicly discussed? And even in February, this conversation was met with resistance by many of our board members. Why? As I reflected on the countless meetings, emails, phone calls, and even professional mediation that I have participated in with KSD leaders over the past few years, I am acutely aware of a troubling response that has repeatedly been given. When concerns about policy violations or even potential illegal practices have been brought to the attention of the administration, you have repeatedly said that you need to hear about them from more people in order to be willing to look into the concerns. This is a very irresponsible approach to leadership, particularly when children are involved. If KSD is doing something wrong, it is the administration's responsibility to look into it, not to wait for a public uproar in order to warrant further consideration. If something is wrong, such as a policy violation, it is wrong. It doesn't matter how many people publicly state concern or express that they are upset about it. This is not about personal opinions or popularity. So here we are finally discussing the resources, but now under the public guise of so-called book banning. This labeling is unproductive and inaccurate. For those who frame this discussion as being about banning books, I suggest looking up the definition of banning. There have always been parameters for what is available to children, particularly in schools. KSD's policies and procedures are very clear about this, but they do not seem to be followed in all cases. So claiming that this is a discussion about censorship is uninformed. You are hired as elected officials, and you are hired and elected to be responsible leaders. When the administration is not following through on action items, it is ultimately the board's responsibility to hold them accountable to that. And the board is accountable to the public. So tonight, I am asking our leaders to hear us, not to hear our personal opinions or preferences, but to hear the community's calls for accountability. And I encourage the public to look beyond the rhetoric and get informed about KSD and the board candidates. For an overview of the February work session I referenced tonight, I suggest you go to Kirkwood for Educational Integrity's website at kfei.org. That's kfei.org. We are Kirkwood, and together we can do this. Thank you.
Okay, next public comment, Mary Fitzgerald.
Good evening. My name is Mary Fitzgerald. I'm a disability advocate and parent in the school district. I've come to congratulate you on one hand and then ask you for help on the other hand. On one hand, you've done a really great job working on the helping readers with challenges in the school district. You've started a new program Sunday. It's a new curriculum. Instead of having over 33 different phonics programs in the district, you now have one. And it sounds like it's been very successful, right, Dr. Painter? It has. And I was lucky enough to be on a committee, and I was able to ask so many questions about how that works and what the data is like and how they collect data. And is it a data-driven, evidence-based program? And it is. And it sounds like it's working. And it's really helping our needy students. I'm asking you to do the same thing for math. Our students, the data shows in your school district, of all the different areas, math is the lowest. When is this going to happen? When are you going to provide a data-driven, evidence-based program, K through 12, that supports our learners? And yes, including textbooks and a system that helps students in the classroom who are your average learners, but also a system that correlates with that to help learners who are challenged, who are struggling, especially students with dyscalculia. There are estimated about 300 students in this school district who get zero data-driven, evidence-based programs. And guess what? IDEA requires that. This school district is not doing that. That puts you all in the position of having grounds for some kind of lawsuit. Due process. If parents knew more and could ask for more and had the money for a lawyer, they'd be doing that. And yes, Courtney, I agree with you. It shouldn't be the other 100 parents having to stand up here and ask for this before something happens. You all should know there's a problem, recognize there's a problem, and do something to help our students who are struggling in math. I really appreciate you listening. You've done this with reading, and please do it with math, and not just for my kid, but for all those other students who really need that help. Algebra is the gateway. Did you know to graduate high school? Gosh, you need algebra. To get into college, gosh, you need algebra. Algebra, algebra, algebra. Math, math, math. The A+ program, you have to have good grades in algebra. If you are a student with a math disability, you are blocked at every level in progressing in this state. And that's extremely frustrating. There's a lot of kids out there who dream of doing something important in a field that requires math. If you're not helping them now to learn that math in their unique learning style, they're never going to be able to progress. You have kids, that's the school to prison pipeline right there. That's kids who lose their dreams because you're not providing a way
Thank
for
you.
them
Your
to
time
get
is
that
up.
math. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to 4.02, approval of the agenda. I need a motion on this.
So, second.
Um, All those in favor of approving the agenda, please raise your right hand and say aye. All those opposed, motion passes. Next up, 5.04. Words and honors, Mrs. Stafford, teacher.
Awards and honors today. On Wednesday, March 9th, Governor Mike Parson visited North Kirkwood Middle School and presented a Missouri proclamation to North and Kirkwood School District students and administrators during an assembly. North received the proclamation for earning the National Blue Ribbon Award. North Kirkwood Middle School is one of only 8 Missouri schools to earn the National Blue Ribbon. Kirkwood High School racquetball team won the national championships. The USA Racquetball Association held the annual USA Racquetball National High School Championships March 2 through 6 at Eda Sports Center around the St. Louis area. The Kirkwood High School boys and girls racquetball teams each placed second in the nation. As a team, Kirkwood High School was recognized as the best overall team, earning them the national championship title. Some 346 high school racquetball players from across the country competed in the national championship. Kirkwood High School had 65 students compete, making the team the largest co-ed junior racquetball program in the country. Kirkwood High School CAP students were recognized at the Missouri School Board Association Legislative Day on March 7th. These are students who participate in Centers for Advanced Professional Studies program, and they were previously announced as grand prize winners of the S.M. Wilson Skills Centennial Award and recognized during the Missouri School Board Association Legislative Day. While at the Capitol in Jefferson City, they had the opportunity to speak with their state legislators as well as members of the Kirkwood School Board who attended. We would also like to say thank you to our social workers. March 6th through 12th of 2022 was the National School Social Work Week. Kirkwood School District recognizes the impactful work our school social workers do to support students, families, and the community. The theme for the National School Social Work Week is Time to Shine. Kirkwood School District believes that our school social workers shine brightly for their students, families, and school communities, shining hope, shining understanding, and shining respect. Finally, we'd like to take a minute today to observe School Board Recognition Week. The Kirkwood School District is joining communities throughout Missouri and honoring our local school board members during School Board Member Recognition Week. It's sponsored by the Missouri School Board Association. Missourians benefit every day from the dedicated energy and countless hours devoted by a group of more than 3,600 men and women from communities across our state. These public servants are elected by local constituents and do not receive compensation for their tireless efforts. They are the local school board members of Missouri. The appreciation on a statewide level is certainly echoed locally and is shown today in person by some of our KSD students. Today's decor is thanks to some of our youngest learners at Kirkwood Early Childhood Center, as well as Adventure Club students who decorated both the banners and the thank you notes that our board members find. So thank you very much to our Board of Education for your service to all of us. Finally, I'd also like to recognize that the Kirkwood School District was featured in today's Post-Dispatch. The story was about our move to the Turner Building. So this is also a reminder that the new location for the Administrative Services Center is 1099 Milwaukee Street. We moved within the last couple of weeks, and we certainly appreciate the Post-Dispatch covering that and allowing us to get the word out to our community.
Thanks, Ms. Dietrich. Okay, moving on to superintendent reports. Next up, winter benchmarking presentation, Dr. Allred.
All right, thank you very much. And Dr. Taylor, as you make your way up, I just want to echo those sentiments that Ms. Dietrich shared with you, specifically surrounding Board Appreciation Week. It has been a particularly tough time in public education over the last couple of years, and that includes what has been asked of our boards of education, including this one. So I just want to say thank you and say how much I appreciate the work that I get to do and the privilege it is to be the superintendent of Kirkwood School District, specifically because of the work we get to do on behalf of kids every day. So thank you very much. This is what Dr. Painter is, and I see Ms. Locke has joined us, we are going to walk you through the winter benchmark presentation. If you'll recall, this is very much the same template that we used a year ago, January, when we shared this information with you. I'll just turn it right over to you, Dr. Painter and Ms. Locke, in terms of walking the board through of the information that we shared as part of the board packet. Dr. Painter?
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity. Tony, this is where I ask you if I should start my video, if I should share screen.
Go ahead and try to share your screen.
Not working.
Okay, I'm making you a co-host, so you should be able to.
That should work. All right, very good. I think I can just do this, and everybody can see everything there. Not sure why that started up on your screen. Okay. It's working. All right, I'm not going full screen with that, so we can just have this one. Board members, you can follow along, I suppose, in Board Docs. So once again, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to have Elizabeth Locke here, our MTSS coordinator, our multi-tier systems and support coordinator. And really, we're speaking today on behalf of any teachers and principals who've been doing really good work in our buildings and sharing some of the data. I will tell you that there are certainly cause for celebration in the data, but there's also things that we need to be growing on and we need to be asking additional questions on. This is not going to be all sunshine and roses for sure, because there are things that we work that we still have to do, of course. Sorry. As is always the case, we want to start with our strategic plan. And so we need to make sure that we're attending to our vision and our mission and our work, of course, and as well as our priority goal areas and our guiding principles. Context for our discussion, we don't need to revisit this in detail, but I just want to let everyone, particularly those at home, kind of remember what's gone on in the last 2 years. It was 2 years ago this month, actually this week, that all of our roles changed a little bit, and definitely school was impacted in ways that none of us could have anticipated. And so starting in March 2020, our schools did have to rapidly shift toward virtual instruction. And then you can follow through in the dates and kind of see, just as a reminder, that there were lots of benchmarks, lots of changes over the next 2 years as we went through our work. Today, we're going to be sharing winter to winter benchmark data. We do normally collect these benchmark data 3 times a year. We were not able to do that all the way through our virtual learning, but we're going to be looking at our winter benchmark data that we recently collected in December and January, and comparing it to what we shared with you last January, which just 2 months after many of our students have returned to in-person learning. So that, just as a reminder, that's kind of our context that we're working with today. Okay. Turn on the right page here. So our focus tonight, and we will be sharing, well, it'll be fourfold. We're going to be sharing some Sabres data, which is focused on social emotional learning and the risk factors that we have for our students. Our students in 3rd through 11th grade this year, minus 10th grade, took the My Sabres risk screener. And so we'll be looking at some of those data and comparing them to last year as well. We'll be looking at literacy benchmark data, math data, and then again, both for winter benchmarks. And then we will be looking at what are called F counts, our F data. So the number of students at the high school level who, for the end of first semester, they had failed to earn credit in the courses that they were taking. As you will remember, we shared those data last year, and you'll remember that there were considerably more students who had failed courses last year at this time than the year before with pre-COVID. So we'll be looking, as we go through all of those areas, we'll be looking at year-to-year data. And I'll give some examples as we go through those. And that would be where we look at first graders for 4 years in a row, for example. First grade classes for 4 years in a row. And then we also will be looking at cohort data, where we would follow those first graders to second grade, third grade, and fourth grade. And so we'll be looking at many of our data points through both of those lenses and trying to keep this as high level as possible. I should just say that when we collect these benchmark data, we do look at them at the district level, of course. We look at it from a programmatic standpoint, but our building principals and our teachers and our data teams are looking at data on an ongoing basis. And so as soon as these data are available at the site level, they are coming together and they're analyzing the data, they're making decisions about kids, and they're making decisions about how they need to respond, not only for intervention, but even more importantly, at the universal instruction level in the classroom with their teachers and all students. So, all right, and then finally, we're going to look at some disaggregated data. Just as we did last year, we'll look at our students who identify as Black or African American, and our students who have Ieps. The next 3 slides I'll just go through so that you have these later if you need to refer back to them. For point of reference, we've included our student counts for the last 4 years. For all students, for our students who identify as Black or African American, and then our students with Ieps. All right, now we're going to dive into My Sabres and a risk screener. And just as a reminder, this is offered to our students. My Sabres is in 3rd through 11th grade. So this slide right here kind of is the literacy and math benchmark data that we'll be providing as well. In K1, we do early reading composition and early math composition. And then in 2nd through 8th grade, our students take A reading and A math. Those are both adaptive assessments. And so what that means basically is how they answer on one question will inform the next question that they get. And so it isn't bound, not every student is taking the exact same assessment, and it's not bound by grade levels. And so if the student is performing 2 grade levels above, then it will give them, and it will give them questions that will take them up to that level, for example. All right. And these screening tools are all from Fastbridge, which is something that we use district-wide. Those data feed into EduClimber as well, which is our data warehouse. I am going to spend a little bit of time on this slide though, because I think it's really important and it's very easy to confuse. And for that matter, if Elizabeth can nudge me if I'm confusing it as well. So all of our data, we can look at our students and how they fit into these very tiered percentiles. It is our goal that 80% or more of our students, obviously we want all of our students to be as high as they can, but it's our goal for 80% or more of our students to be meeting benchmark through our universal or core instruction that we provide to all students in our classrooms. 80% is the top 3 areas. So the olive green, the regular green, and the blue. If that's 40th percentile and above, is where we want all of our students, and that 40th percentile is what's deemed to be meeting benchmark. Just below that green, just a little below the 40th percentile, is the 26th to 39th percentile. That lime green, those are students who actually, some of them may be performing at grade level, but the research suggests that our students performing in this level, even though they may be at grade level, they're still at some academic risk going forward in literacy or math at the beginning of the assessment. And then our students in the yellow and the red area, typically if they are below the 15th or 20th percentile, those are the students that we would most definitely have on our radar for interventions or tiered supports, either receiving supplemental or intensive supports, or both actually, in some cases, outside of the classroom or within the classroom. It depends, and because there are lots of ways that we can add intensity or provide different programming in support of the universal that's happening in the classroom. Okay. Now we're going to move into our social, academic, emotional, and behavioral risk. Before I do that, are there any questions about what I just shared? All right, seeing none, we will continue forward. As we move through these data, I do want to point out that there are, again, areas for celebration, but there are areas for growth for sure. And again, I just want to celebrate the work of our teachers, our students, our principals, our families, because there's a lot to do, and particularly in our current context and our recent context, we've had to overcome a lot. And so we're going to see some things, and hopefully you will be excited about some of these data. That there definitely are things that haven't happened without a lot of hard work and a lot of support from everybody involved, because we all care about and love our kids and want them to be successful. But there's also areas of growth for sure going forward. All right, these data, I apologize. I know it's very difficult to see from out there or even online. But what we're looking at now are year-to-year data. So 4 different groups, for example, of third graders. Third grade is on the far left-hand side. So there are 4 different groups of third graders presented here, all the way through 8th graders, actually through 9th and 11th graders as well. Looking at these, you will notice the gray in every case is last year. So those were the data that were collected in some, right around the time, within a couple of months of us coming back to full or in-person learning as much as possible. So the gray are last year, the red are this year. And so you can see on this graph, for example, that in 3rd grade, which is again is the far left, 83% of our students basically showed up as no risk last year on the SABRES self-assessment in 3rd grade, which of course means that 17% showed up as either high risk or some risk. This year, 87%. So we had fewer students showing up as at risk this year. As you look across the entire graph, I promise I won't give examples like that on every page. But as you look across the entire graph, you can see that there are definite gains made in every year. There are fewer students in every grade level who were scoring as at risk than the previous year at that grade level. Keep in mind, these are different groups of students on the grade level. So shifting to the next page, we can look at cohort data. For example, I'm going to go to 6th grade, which is the 4th from the left. The 6th grade, 92% this year showed up as not at risk. Last year, that group as 3rd graders was 86%. The year before, as 2nd graders, it was 85, and the year before, as 1st graders, it was 82. So that follows the same group of students. And again, there's a lot to celebrate here. I do not really discount at all the trauma that all of our students, all of our families, all of our teachers, all of us have experienced in the last two years. We've gone through a lot, and frankly, I think at varying levels for various people, I think it's going to take a long time for some people to recover and feel like maybe they did before COVID. But the good news is here, our students are reporting that they feel less at risk than they did before. And that is a good thing. And in many of these cases, they actually are reporting better than they did pre-COVID, which is also something to celebrate. So that's exciting, I think, and that's something that we can celebrate and still ask questions about, because we want 100% of our students to show up as not at risk. But this at least gives us, it helps our support people in our buildings be more focused on fewer students who are on their radars, which I think is a good thing. The next slide shows the same data. These are cohort data for only our students who identify as Black or African American. Again, the gray is last year at this time, the red is this year, our most recent assessments that we've had. There are definite gains to be celebrated here, but there are some areas that, first of all, are lower than we would like them to be, lower than they were for all students. And there are a couple of areas that are roughly where they were, or maybe even a little bit lower than they were last year. And so those are questions we need to be asking, and those are, it informs who we need to be talking to next, so that we can learn more and figure out how we can better support these kids. The next slide is, again, cohort data for students who have an IEP. Again, there were significant gains made in some grade levels. Actually, I think in all grade levels, we are higher than we were last year. And that's an exciting thing for us. But in all grade levels, or almost all grade levels, they are lower than they are for all students, which means that our students who don't have IEPs may be scored higher than these students. So we want to make sure, and I know that our buildings are already looking at these data at the building level, and they're doing what they can to support these kids. Our SEB teams in every building have extensive conversations about these results and how they can make it. First of all, is there anybody who showed up that's not already on our radar? But then secondly, do we have the right supports in place for those kids? Is there anything additional that we need to be providing? That's just how things work at the school level.
Dr. Weiner, before
Yes.
we move on to literacy, can we
Yes.
pause and take questions? I think
Perfect.
it's a natural
Yes,
type.
this is
Um,
my next slide said pause.
Okay.
My notes do.
So board members, at this time, if you have any questions, Ms. Bangor?
Dr. Peter, I have two questions. Last year, the savers data in our, or what we're showing in those graphs, did we also include virtual students?
We did, yes.
Okay.
Well,
So that is all of our students.
we did, not all of our students provided feedback. It's a little bit easier for us when they're in person for us to gather the data, but there were some students, I believe, who maybe didn't do my savers who were
I
learning
mean, they
virtually.
were all offered, you know, they had the abilities.
So they were all, okay. And then is there a reason that 11th grade is not shown?
Yes. On our cohort data, actually, this is the first year that we've done 11th graders. And 2 years ago, we did 9th graders. But last year, we didn't do any of those. And that was just because of the timing of the matter the high school felt. Because I believe my savers was taken late fall. And so that was like right as students were coming back. At the time, if you remember right, I guess October, November of 2021, 21. It was 20. They were here in the mornings live in person, and then they were going home for lunch, and then they were getting online and doing coursework. They didn't have homeroom. Many of these are taken during homeroom at our high school level, and so it was just very difficult to figure out how to make that happen at that time. But we're excited that we have more students taking it now, and we will actually next year, I believe, we will have 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders with that data.
Absolutely.
What percentage of our students respond to offer?
I can't tell you the exact percentage without, I mean, I could look it up. It's up to you, but it's pretty high. I mean, it's almost, it's above 90%.
Yep. And Dr. Ulrich, that's something that you can get back.
Yeah.
Ms. Sher?
Thank you for the speaker. Jada, just pull your microphone closer, sorry. All right, thank you. Question, because I know we introduced Panorama in the fall, which is also an Cgdl tool measurement tool. So can you explain the difference between the two? Like, because I'm just concerned about survey fatigue, or have we like looked at both measurement tools? Are the same questions being asked, or are we looking at the results of both and seeing if they align, if the data align?
So a large focus of the panorama data was the climate and the culture and the belonging. So it was more of those types of questions, and there were less questions on how individual students feel. I mean, there were some, but not as many as the savers. So kind of a little bit comparing the same, but also more looking at two different kinds of metrics in terms of that culture and climate versus up on the savers. All of the statements are I feel, or I do this, or so the kids are really reflecting on themselves versus panorama talking about the environment, their teachers, lots of different things.
But it does have that ability to do the SDL piece. So I'm just wondering, because like, as we're doing panorama twice a year, correct? And then savers twice a year. I'm just thinking like it's something to think through. If we just streamline it and just do one survey, that would get the same result.
So maybe Dr. Ulrich, if you could put in an update, the difference between panorama and savers at a, you know,
Comparing it with confident, no, not.
Well, we did actually ask the SEL questions on panorama as well. We have not analyzed those as much as we have the culture, the climate, and the belonging pieces of that, because those are the ones who are really, that's our focus in the strategic plan. We have looked at those data, and our school-based teams have looked at the data from panorama. I will say that our internal conversations were, let's look at both of them for at least a year and see if they're telling us the same thing, because I agree, we can minimize the number of surveys that we provide. I think the benefit to this right now is to savers is we have multiple years of data here. And so we're able to track that progress. But I agree with you that we want to make sure that if we're asking, if we're providing these screeners for our students, let's make sure it's beneficial and not repetitive.
Right, if we're looking at the data, like, did that student score the same on panorama as they did with my savers?
Yes.
Or what
Yes, I believe at the school teams, they were looking at, because panorama also puts kids in tiers based on those needs, based on how they respond.
I have a question. What factors do you think you feel impacted the savers data? Because it's, you know, I mean, it was an increase, you know, over.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would be speculating. I do think that our students, there was more certainty, if you will, this year when they took it as opposed to last year when they took it for the winter assessment or the winter benchmarking. They were just coming back, and not all of our students were even staying full day. This year when they took it in October, they were in school, they've been in school. We hadn't had the significant disruptions as much. And so that may be some of it. I think most of our kids like being in school, not all of them for sure.
Yeah, and I guess I'm kind of wondering, you know, we put some programs in place.
Oh, absolutely.
That have, you know, I think that we need to look at that. Like, is there a correlation? I think that we put some SEL programs, can't remember the names of them, but we have SEL coaches, we have, so again, just trying to draw the line, what's impact, I mean, it's an impact to our SEL data. And so kind of trying to see like, well, you know, what works.
Absolutely. And that's our responsibility as look for patterns.
Yeah.
I'm excited to get our next wave, because I think within the next 2-3 weeks, we'll have our second assessment for this year. And so we'll be able to look at those data and see not only how they compare to the fall, but how they compare to last spring.
Okay.
Because those are updates we provide you as well.
Okay, and then just to be clear on the high school, the expectation will be that the high school will take it grades 9 through 12 next year.
Dr. Bailey, do you remember exactly what the conversations we've had?
And if you don't, if an expectation has not been set, just say that. And I think it's important for the board to come back to us with what the expectation.
Yeah, and we were talking to the high school team about, again, looking at the panoramic data and Sabres data, and looking whether we would want to roll that up, but it would be something we would talk to the high school about including 12 on down to 9th grade, so we can continue to have that historical data for those specific students.
The original plan, I believe, was to phase it up freshman 1 year, the next year freshman and sophomore, which would have been last year, but we weren't able to do that. And then roll it up, keep going.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, keep on going.
All right, keep on going. We're going to literacy now. This is where I want to remind you that one slide that we spent some time on, that our goal is for 80% or more of our students to hit that 40% or more benchmark, which are 40th percentile, I guess, benchmark. And there are two separate measures that we use. K1 uses early reading composite, and A reading is in second to 8th grade. I will say we're not diving because we're trying to stay as high level as possible. There's also sub skills that we look at, and that we look at the district level and at the building level. And when we talk, for example, about Sunday, our phonics program, there will be noticeable gains, I believe, in some of the sub skills within early reading composite, for example, that we're looking for. We're excited to see those as we get further into the year. Okay, these slides the board has already seen. When we shared these 2 weeks ago, I believe, or Dr. Holman shared these in his Friday update. These, just as a reminder, these slides, which is this one and the math one you've already seen. This actually looks at fall and winter benchmarking for over several years. And so the rest of them we're looking at is just winter to winter. This one looks at fall and winter, and it's from 2018 to 21, except for the fact that we couldn't provide the fall benchmark in 2020 due to COVID reasons. On this one, again, we're looking at the national percentile tiers. And on the next sets of slides going forward, we're looking at the percent of students meeting or exceeding, again, if you can see me moving my cursor here, the line, the benchmark line, that's at 40th percentile and above. So the green, olive green, and blue, that's our goal for all of those kids, for all of our kids to be, or at least 80% to be above that line. Looking now, this is year to year. So these are, for example, 4 different years of second graders. Different groups. Again, gray is last year and red is this year. I like looking at these because at the building level, at the program level, we're looking, for example, to see how are things going for our first graders, because there are first grade teachers who are not reading with their kids, who are teaching first grade multiple years in a row potentially. And first grade is a good one to look at, for example, because we can see that 47% of our kids were meeting benchmark last winter, and this year we're up to 59% of our kids. Are we at 80%? No, not at all. But the whole country is worried about our K2 readers, quite honestly, right now. The research has shown that those are the ones in literacy that we have that have the most at risk, that are most at risk because of the disruptions that we've had. And so we are hoping to see those gains there, and it's exciting to see those. Kindergarten, for example, the gains were even greater from last year to this year, 35% to 62%. So those are things that we can look at, and I think we're really excited about. When we look at the cohort data on the next slide, so on this slide, for example, you can see those gains were even greater. Our last year's kindergartners, which I know we spent a lot of time looking at those data, last year's kindergartners, 35% of our students were meeting benchmark. This year it's 59%. And so that group of students definitely made some gains. You can see that those gains are almost across the board. Third, fourth, seventh, and eighth grade are near 80%. Fifth and sixth grade are above 80%. We have grade levels that are right around, or in some cases above pre-COVID levels, which is amazing. I think that is a testimony to the work of our teachers and our kids and our parents, that they have gotten back to pre-COVID levels in some of these cases, or even exceeding pre-COVID levels. I think it would be hard for us not to look at the fact that seventh and eighth grade are the red bars are lower than the gray bar. So something's going on there with those kiddos that we have to dive into. Some of it could be eighth grade ice. But I do think that we have a responsibility to continue having these conversations. And I know that our buildings, our middle schools, in their PLCs have been having conversations around the data and trying to figure out how we can best support those students in literacy at the seventh and eighth grade level. I will say it's exciting because, for example, the sixth grade scores 85% at benchmark. The year before that was 77%. Those transition years are critical for our kids. And so this was a year where those fifth graders, who, when all of this started, were in fourth grade. That could have been another group that continued to struggle for years going forward. And at least in literacy, it looks like they've made some gains. And actually, in this case, they're caught up to where they were pre-COVID. So that's an exciting thing. Okay, I'll move on to the next slide, which is looking at cohort data for just our students who are identified as Black or African American. First thing you notice, we all notice that, is that the bars are lower, which is not something that we want. Didn't mean to have that pun there, but I mean, really, the bar should be the same for all of our students. And we have high expectations for all of our kids and for ourselves. And we want our students of color to be at or above where everybody else is at. And so that is something that we have to continue looking at. There were definite gains made, gains from K to 1, also second to third, fourth to fifth, and fifth to sixth. It's worth noting that there were drops, however, from first to second, third to fourth, sixth to seventh, and seventh to eighth. I can speculate on why, but I think it's more important that we do our research and we dig in and we find out and we talk to these kids, we talk to the families, talk to the teachers, figure out what's going on. The next slide is looking at our cohort data for students with IEPs. The growth data is, you can see that, again, the bars are lower than we'd like them to be, but there are areas that we can point to with K1, first to second, and fifth to sixth, where we definitely made gains from last year. Again, gray is last year, red is this year. But again, we had drops in 5 grade levels. That's not something that we would hope for at any point. So we have to figure out why, what's going on, particularly when we know that we are providing the systematic and direct instruction at Sunday to all of our students. And so our students of color, our students with IEPs, they are receiving the same instruction. So we want to make sure that any instruction that we're providing is working for all of our students and not just some of our students. All right, that's where I pause again. That's the end of literacy. And so I'll take your questions and then pass them over to Elizabeth.
Okay, Mr. Boyko.
So less of a question, more of a statement, and it applies to the math too, but I wanted to bring it up when this benchmarking assessment on literacy is up. To me, what struck me is that the differences between sort of post-COVID and pre-COVID numbers kind of attacks the whole spectrum of our learners, from the very high performing to the low performing scores. And so to the extent, and I think we've done a lot of good things over the last few years, but to the extent I've got a criticism here, I think we have more resources, whether from the federal dollars or from our own budget, that could be spent, attacking this sooner rather than later. And I know, it's not really my place to speculate on what the best way of attack is, but things that would address all learners, whether it's having more TAs or whether it's temporarily reducing class size. I know there's, structural limitations on that. on all those things, but, you know, I do think that with the expertise we have, we should be able to put our heads together and come up with a way to attack some of these gaps that encompasses not just our you know, learners who aren't meeting the benchmark, but actually all of our learners.
So Mr. Boyko, are you looking for a plan to be developed for that?
I mean, my preference would be that I guess, yes, that we would have, and I know that we have a plan for addressing sort of spending some of the federal resources that we have, you know, but I'd like to make sure that we've got a plan, even if it requires some of our district resources, that matches the sort of gravity of what we're seeing.
So Dr. Oliver, can you put your board update? When you can have a plan to address this and kind of have a timeline of that.
Well, and I think you may remember last spring, as a result of last year's data, we brought to you this goal for us to have a 3-year literacy plan. And we have we've invested some dollars in this work, and our teachers have invested, frankly, a lot of time in this work. And we've been thrilled with the progress thus far of Literacy Link as our job embedded coaches that we have working with our teachers. I think we're going to see tremendous gains going forward with this work. We've really tightened up, I believe, our universal instruction across the board. And frankly, I believe that our teachers are growing strategies that aren't just literacy strategies, they're good teaching strategies that we're able to apply throughout the day. But we are to the point where we're to the point of the year where we take our 3-year literacy plan and say, okay, with year 1 kind of almost behind us, what does next year look like? What's our focus, and how can we continue and build on the momentum that we have right now?
Yeah, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Boyko, I think that the plan would be, we continue with the literacy plan, but I think what Mr. Boyko is asking for is a plan to address COVID-specific loss across the board.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the literacy work that's been done. You've heard me say that before.
Yes.
So to be clear, it's not sort of scrapping anything that we have done. I'm talking about temporary meaning months or maybe a year or two, something that's, a program that's going to go away or a hiring that's going to go away, but we need it at this moment for this time, to address the needs that we have.
Thank you.
Okay. Sure.
I just want to piggyback off of Mr. Boyko's statement. Yeah, outside of the literacy programs, I think it's great as well. Looking at after school tutoring, is there any way to partner with any outside community resources to help kids, move the gap, not just having conversations, but we're actually, providing. Now, whether they take advantage of it or not, we will have these things in place.
Okay.
I'll save my comments for the
Okay,
summer school
okay.
portion of the program,
Okay.
because I feel like the summer provides us quite
Okay.
a fine opportunity to try and close this achievement gap. So I'll wait, because I know you're getting there. There's an overhead coming up.
Okay, I do have a question. Okay. So are the percentage of kids that are not meeting benchmark, are their parents notified? Do their parents know that they are not at benchmark?
Yes, and. So one of the layers we have with our multi-tiered systems of support is kind of in trying to use our resources effectively. If we don't have 80% of kids meeting benchmark, then that often means that we need to adjust and change something at that universal tier 1 level, as opposed to trying to figure out how to pull larger groups of kids or pull kids out of the classroom, that it's better for the kids and more effective if we change what's happening in the classroom, because more kids have needs. For kids that are getting pulled out of the classroom for a reading intervention or a math for that matter, yes, the parents are informed that they're receiving that.
Okay, so then I guess I have to ask. So the percentage of kids who are not meeting benchmark are not guaranteed that they're getting the service.
Not getting a pull-out service, but they're getting ideally a service in the classroom with their teacher in a smaller group. That can happen in lots of different ways.
Yeah.
So, Ms. Locke, Dr. Painter, I just want to reframe that. So if you look at our literacy data, and if you look at early reading English composite K1, 2nd through 8th grade, and you look at, I'll just pick 2nd grade. 67% of our students are reported as being at benchmark. That leaves 33%. I believe if I'm characterizing Ms. Andrews' question, that 30% of parents, have they been communicated with that those students are, that their student on the winter benchmarking data did not reach that 40% benchmark? Do those parents automatically, as part of our communication, receive that information?
And this,
Is that a fair?
yeah, and here's, this can be a conversation for another time. But I think what I just want to say is, if my kid is not meeting benchmark, I, as a parent, deserve to know, and the parents in this district deserve to know. So, if we're not doing that, we need to do that, because so what I'm looking for then is follow-up from you, Dr. Allred, on whether this is occurring. And if it's not occurring, what is the plan to make this occur? And so my next question, I know Dr. Painter had mentioned, we have to dig in and talk to the students and families. Can you walk us through what that looks like right now? In terms of, I think it was around the data in you had kind of mentioned that we've got to kind of talk to the students, talk to the parents to kind of figure out what's going on. So can you walk us through how that?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we start with classroom teachers. Because they know their students very well, and they have those relationships with the kids and the parents, and they're able to provide some additional insights. I think one thing we have to remember is that these benchmark assessments are benchmarks. They are one data point. And so when we make decisions about our students, we rarely look at one data point and say, that's it. That's exactly what we know about those kids. And so some of the students who might fail to make benchmark on fast pitch assessment, a reading, might also be doing really well in the classroom. And so when we have those conversations in a data team meeting, the teachers, frankly, the teachers can say, yes, that is representative of the learning that I see from the students. Or they might say, that's really interesting, I need to dig a little bit more because I'm not seeing that in the classroom from them at all. And so there isn't necessarily a point where we say, you're failing to meet benchmark, and so you are not performing well in the classroom, or you're not going to get 3 on the rubrics, or you're not at grade level. This is one piece of data that we definitely have to ask questions about. So if they're not performing well on this, but they're doing well in the classroom, then what's up with that? Why do we understand what could be the issues behind that? Frankly, there may be some issues in our principals. As a principal at Kaiser, I saw patterns as well that maybe our teachers wouldn't see because they're so close to the kids. And if I'm able to see it across a grade level or across the building, those sorts of things. And so those conversations are happening in the data team meetings, I believe. We have programmatic, I think, conversations at the district level, but the further removed you get from the individual students, the less detailed, specific information about kids that you have. And so that's where I want the teachers and the principals and the interventionists that work with these kids, who often, you know, in Elizabeth's case, when she was talking about if 80% or more are not meeting benchmark, it's possible that instead of having a reading specialist pulling kids out, they're pushing it into the classrooms and supporting within a reading block, so that more students are getting more adults within that literacy time.
And I'll just follow up real quickly on what I seem to hear from the board, and this is to Dr. Ulrich. You're pretty much giving permission to be bold, think outside the box. Look at that bottom third and how they're performing in the entire district, the bottom third. And if we can somehow make sure we help them and get them to where they need to be, not saying this is the end all be all data point like Dr. Painter would just say. However, we know that we have a bottom third that we need some extra assistance. Be bold, come up with something that the board would support and get behind. You know, you've got resources, we've got some funding that we can possibly use toward it. So we have some options that we can look at it, and don't, you know, bring us something back, take a look at it, see what you guys come up with. I think you'd be supported if you come up with something that would help the bottom third.
I appreciate that.
Now, I just want to add on to what Darnell said and what Dr. Painter taught me to learn from others. So if there's something else out there that we can do that will work, of course, bring it to the board. And I think we all agree, whatever it is, we're lucky enough to have special funding for COVID gaps. So I think that we'll talk about it in a minute.
Okay, Mr. Boyka.
Yeah, and to Darnell said it well, but I will piggyback. My concern is actually not just the bottom third, but it's all the students. I think we look at the A reading data, you see even the students scoring in the top 5%, you know, has shrunk within the top 25%. So it's kind of across the board as far as I see it.
I will say that we have, I think it's fair to say that we're looking at growth data much more than we have been in the past. We want all of our students, if they were already, even if they're already meeting benchmark or scoring at the 80th percentile or 90th percentile, we want them to be making growth that is continuing to move them forward. It may be aggressive growth, or it may be typical growth. But ideally, we have students who are moving forward regardless of where they're at. We know that we have many of our students who frankly walk in the door doing pretty well. And we want to continue moving them forward and not just be happy with the fact that they're doing good.
On to math.
On to math. Okay. So this slide, I believe you received this last Friday, I believe it was. And so this is just as we mentioned with the literacy, just as a reminder, this was fall and winter, and this is a good example to show what Mr. Boyko was just speaking to. The fact that we had, for example, on the far left-hand side of the upper side in early math composite, we had more students scoring in blue than we did in fall 2018 than we do in winter 2021. The actual benchmark line may not be as dramatic of a difference, but we want to make sure that our students are performing well or continuing to perform well, and that we notice that growth with all of them. As a reminder, our goal is to have 80% or more scoring in 40th percentile. And yeah, I like to say that because we've talked about it with the literacy. So once again, this is grade to grade. So we're looking at 4 on the left-hand side, 4 different kindergarten groups. So if I'm a kindergarten teacher for the last 4 years, I may be a part of all 4 years of those data, but no students are a part of those data for 4 years in a row. First thing that you notice is, or that I notice, is that we have 3 grades that are at or above 80%, even after what we've been through the last 2 years, which is exciting to me. All of our grade levels are at 75% or more hitting the benchmark or hitting that 40th percentile. 3 of our grades are at pre-COVID, are at or above pre-COVID numbers at this point. So that's an exciting thing, I think. Going to the next slide. This is cohort data, so this is looking at year-to-year improvement for groups of students as they move through the system. We are not yet back to pre-COVID levels in most of our grade levels. You can notice that there are definite some improvements that we can talk about that we should be celebrating. I think it's amazing to me that 82% of our kindergartners, for example, were at or above benchmark. Given the fact that many of those kiddos, if they had a preschool experience, it was very much disruptive, just as our other kids were. So that is a testament not only to our kindergarten teachers and our kiddos, but to the early childhood teachers that they had, and of course to their parents for the work that they've done with them at home. And so you can see, again, it's important to, in my mind, it's important to look at the gray versus the red, so last year versus this year. And then I think it also is nice to look at the pre-COVID. So the yellow bar being the year before COVID, for example, in fourth grade, we made gains. Those students did from third grade to fourth grade, from 69% to 75%. But when they were in second grade, it was 83%. So we're not back to where we want them to be, for sure. The next slide is showing our students who identify as Black or African American and their benchmark data. This is again a cohort data. The first thing that jumps out to me is our kindergarten numbers, which not where it was for all students for sure. I discount that, but I do believe that 55% of our students who are Black or African American in kindergarten is the highest number of students who have met benchmark in recent history. So that is fantastic. We have a great foundation in those kids that we can continue to build on going forward, and that's our expectation. So there were definite gains made in most grade levels from last year. Again, the gray bar to the red bar, we show growth in most years. Seventh grade is one that we want to look at that, because that's not the trajectory that we want for any of our kids. So we have to, first of all, we need to look at the numbers. This what Artie is talking about over many years, that we have to look and see how many students are that's previous slide was in there. What does that look like? How many kids does that represent? And then that's where the case with our middle schools are going back, and that's not 17%. Those kids have names, and we know what they're doing. We have to make sure that they're on our radar, that we're supporting them with the right interventions. And the last slide like this, the next slide is our cohort groups for students with IEPs. In this one, fourth grade levels from last year did drop from last year to this year. And so we need to be asking questions about why is that? And what can we do to support that? What's already in place, what our buildings already doing to support that work? There were gains made in first and second, from first to second grade. That our current second grade bars right there going from 47 in first grade to 71. That's a pretty dramatic increase. So that means something great has happened with those kids in the last year as well. But overall, I think we're not where we want to be in many of these grade levels. So that's something for us to work not only on the special ed side, repeat that, not only on the special ed side, on the gen ed side. All of us need to be working together to support and help our kids with universal instruction and then their supports that they receive as well. I'm going to pause there.
Thank you. Dr. Painter, I have a question. Did something change for our current fifth and sixth graders with the bar from the winter of 2018 was significantly higher, and then it continues to drop? That's pre-COVID. So is he changing?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? Are you on all students?
Ours,
Okay.
all of our students,
Okay.
African American and the Black students, and our students with IEPs, current fifth and current sixth grade, the bar goes from blue, yellow,
Yes.
gray, red. So did something significantly change in curriculum during this?
In curriculum,
Or teaching and learning or something?
I will say no. I will say that we did adopt a new math program 5 years ago. And so, and that is something that's actually up for review. Some of our teachers are telling us that we don't know that it is meeting the needs of our students like we want it to, and so we're having to supplement in some ways. That is something that we are looking at, and so that's a great question for us to be looking at and saying, is it having an impact? Because clearly it's not having an impact in some grade levels, a negative impact, but is that one of the challenges that we might be having in those grade levels? That's a good question. It is, it's starting. It's a start sort of, yes. I don't know that the assessment's changed.
No, the assessment.
Other questions about that?
Okay, seeing no questions, I just want to thank you both. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
This is a one-slide presentation. Sorry, thank you. This report is, as you've noticed, everything so far has been K. It is certainly not that we don't value the high school, and it certainly is not that they're not analyzing their own data. They have AMP data that they are using at the course level. But we shared these data last year because they were, quite frankly, alarming to everybody. The middle group right there is last year at this time. And so just as a reminder to read this, last year at the end of winter semester, the blue bars in the middle are fall 20. That was 64 students received, 64 freshmen received one or more Fs. And those 64 students accounted for 164 failing grades, which means that's 164 credits that we have to figure out how to make up some of that. And so if you look at the freshmen and then you add in all the other grade levels, that's a high school that already is trying to do a lot with kids that now has to try to figure out how to do even more to support and help those kids recover their credits. To their credit, they have done a lot of work with that. Now, some of the work that they had previously done in summer school, they actually started last spring with kids, so that kids had the opportunity to recover some of the fall credits during the spring. In some cases, that's necessary because those kids are finishing up a year-long course, and you need to learn what you missed in the first semester so you can be successful in the second semester. So there's that. You can notice that on the left-hand side, the gold kind of rectangle is fall 1000. That's the fall pre-COVID. The middle is last year at this time or in winter, and then on the right-hand side, that is our most recent semester. It is obviously it's dropped much closer to where it was pre-COVID. And I will report the high school is already, they said that 19 of the 106 total failing grades from winter semester this last year, fall semester this last year, have been recovered as of March 8th. And they have students who are still recovering now. And then they have plans in place, of course, just like they did last summer, to help students recover as well. I should have grabbed the numbers, but there were a number of students who recovered one or both semesters from last year that they had Fs. They recovered those grades summer school under the leadership of Mr. All right. Any questions on that? Because that's a one page. If not, then I will pass this over to Dr. Ulrich. He has had lots of conversations with principals during his mid-year evaluations and conversations. And so he can share some of the halftime adjustments that have been made, if you want to call them that, to support, because again, just like I said at the beginning, we look building-wide or district-wide programmatically, but at the building level, as soon as they have these data, they're going to do some adjustments.
All right, thank you, Dr. Boehner and Ms. Locke. I want to make sure that the board is aware that obviously we did not wait to respond to this data to reporting this to you tonight. In fact, when this data came in, starting second semester and as part of the mid-year evaluations that I do with the principals, one of the things that we do is we review. What are you doing? You have this data, now what? And so I just compiled a list here of different things that principals are doing as a result of their data. At one of our elementary schools at the second grade level in particular, they swarmed the grade level 3 days per week for 30 minutes extra to do small group guided reading with their students. And talking about the additional resources that we do have available, Mr. Boyko adjusted, many of our schools adjusted their TA and intervention schedules to provide push-in as well as pull-out support for targeted classrooms and students based on that data. They are hosting a double plan, kindergarten and first grade, around the integration of sound walls to support phonics instruction. Again, adjusting the TA schedule to ensure adult support in kindergarten and first grade. Using a co-teaching model K through 2 with a teacher interventionist. Based on that data, they changed what happened during that co-teaching time. Specifically, they went to double dipping, in this case, integrity lessons for students who are under benchmark. Working with Ms. Locke, creating Illuminate assessments to work for 3rd to 5th grade, review and analyze and break apart that data. And then having the support of our literacy link folks. At the middle school, using Alex math intervention to help gaps for students there. Literacy support and math support are being updated to provide student supports who need it and exit kids who no longer need it. Teacher schedule, there was a teacher schedule that was adjusted to add a 6th grade literacy class for students whose data suggested need more intense support. And reading interventionists added they added a reading support class to their schedule to support clusters of students who need help transferring their skills to the general education setting. And so that's just a couple of things, very specific items that our teachers, our TAs, and our principals are being very responsive to the data. I agree with Dr. Painter. I'm very anxious to see the spring data to see how far our kids have come. I think that, as Dr. Painter has pointed out multiple times, we have areas of celebration, but we have areas that we need to really focus our work. But I do want to make sure that the board is confident that we are working specifically and directly with our principals as part of their evaluation process with the expectation that they not only collect the data, but they respond very specifically to the data. And then, Mr. Boyko, I think that you'll see, and the rest of the board will see, as we go through our changes, our proposed changes to our summer school, I think that you will see some of that bold thinking that is research-based to get out and make sure that we're accelerating that learning throughout the summer. With your permission, I'll turn it back to Dr. Payne.
Yeah, I do have a quick question. So the list that you just came up, just shared with us. So is that happening across all buildings? Is it just a specific building? We can.
Yeah, there are aspects like utilizing the TAs, push in those models. That's happening across the buildings. More specific things like swarming at the 2nd grade. That was a direct result of that building's data. And so that's where that principle is.
Okay, so what I guess I'm asking is, if another building has the same data, do they employ the strategy of swarming? Or is it only specific to that building because that's a strategy that principal uses?
That was a strategy that principal used based on the data that was collected in her building, in terms of that data was unique to the 5 buildings, the 5 elementary school buildings.
I guess what I'm asking, if the exact data was at another building, would they swarm at that building?
I can't say that principal working with his or her team would make that same exact choice.
Back to you.
All right, I will move quickly on this. We're excited. This is the first time actually we're even having a chance to talk about plans for summer school this year. And so we are working very closely with our principals to talk about this. Our high school is ahead of the game because the program is going to look very similar to what it looked like last year. But elementary and middle school, we are still fine tuning and getting some of the specifics. Actually, we've had some specifics added even since you received this last Thursday. And so this is just kind of the overview. I want to point out that we do have at the elementary, middle school, and high school level, we have summer programming for all of our students that are going to be at the elementary and middle level much more intense and much more broad, I guess, than we've had in recent years. SSD does have their extended school year program that will be taking place in June at our elementary, middle, and high school level. And then I continue to say that if we have students who might benefit from lunch and to take advantage of both, depending on how how the timing works for their calendar to take advantage of both Kirkwood and launch programming. And that is at no cost to our families or to the district. And so launch offers some terrific programs. And they, just like all of us, I think in a virtual world, they learned from COVID and realized that there's a value to the live synchronous instruction through online instruction. And so that is happening more and more through launch as well. I can't say enough about the services that they offer our students and students across the state. So diving in more specifically, elementary summer programming, we're looking at 20 days of 9 to 3 programming. That is an increase from 28 hours last year to 120 hours of contact instructional time this year. That is been around for a while in this district. The Sissels could say the same thing. Both of us were like, we don't remember anything that intense, that comprehensive at the elementary level during our time in Kirkwood. Now we have to do it. That's another piece of it. And we have to find staff who will do it because frankly, teachers are tired and they deserve to be tired. So we tried to find ways that we could get them to make this more appealing to them, but also recognize that starting this up the week after school gets out might not be a good idea in all cases. And so I'm trying to, again, work with them and try to figure out how we can get all of our kids involved in that. Yes.
Are you putting that out? Is it right now? It's internal. I'd say if it doesn't work,
Absolutely. That is our
out
plan. That
and
is our
widen
plan.
your net.
That is our plan. We have started with basically a 2-week window of this is, we're trying our principals, we posted, I believe, either yesterday or Friday. So we are trying to secure those internally first, but you're right, that we are widening the net. And they could be teachers from other districts. They could also be pre-service teachers who are coming, we want certified teachers because those are really the ones who can best meet the needs of our kids. But we need adults to work with our kids and we want to include as many students as possible. And we don't want it to be a case where we can't have some students be there who want to be there because we don't have enough adults to work with. We are targeting our rising 1st through 5th graders. Our goal is to serve at least 200 students. Ideally, we can get up to 300 maybe with 10 to 12 students per class. Initially, we're doing invitations only. At least 3 of our schools are starting with invitations at parent-teacher conferences this week. But I think other ones are also getting those out to families. They've been generating a list, their initial list. And we have additional information we're hitting on our website as well. Great.
I have a quick question just going off of something you said there. If we are hiring teachers that are not currently teachers, are we communicating to parents?
Yes.
Beforehand?
Yes, we will make sure that we have that. Yes, we will be sharing that information with families so that they know. Ideally, best case scenario, frankly, they're getting teachers from their home school. That's our first goal. Because we want them building relationships potentially with the teacher they could have next year. But again, we want to make sure that we're not limiting ourselves because we just don't have the staff to support.
Yeah, I know, and I completely agree and understand. Love the focus that you're putting on casting the larger net. Just want to make sure that we're completely
Yes,
on who's going to be in the building.
absolutely. Well, and we also want to make sure we're training them up because we want to be consistent with the programs that we use during the school year. And so we have to make sure that if somebody who's not using Sunday, for example, I can make sure that they're ready to go as soon as possible to support them. All right, moving on to middle school.
I had a question.
Oh, sorry.
I was saving up my questions because I'm really concerned about the achievement gap. And we saw it on all the charts. And this gap continues to grow for those most in need. So summer learning loss adds on top of the achievement gap. So how can we serve the most students, which I think is great, we're serving more students, but with a proven model, with measurable objectives and benchmarks to close the gap. So in our own strategic plan, I went back and looked, and it says that we should explore possible collaborations to enhance participation in summer learning. And I'm wondering about the timeline because it's already March 14th, and our last day on the strategic plan to be everything completed was tomorrow. So I know that there's a lot of good work to do, and I keep hearing from everybody that we should be bold. there are outside resources, and also we have our own internal program as well. So what's the best way to get this done? Of course, teachers are a challenge to get with the students, but we even mentioned it in our strategic plan. There's a Horizons model that we have for some of our students that we can expand as well. And I'm hopeful that these programs can work together as they did last year. So my question is, what is the timeline? Do you need more resources? Can you get more outside collaboration to serve more students? That's a lot of students, 300 students. And then when would we see that information? If you needed more resources or money, or maybe we do some of it a different way. I mean, there's always another way, or maybe somebody's doing it a better way, but something measurable that we know we can look at and say that it means different.
Okay, so just to be clear, you're looking for a summer school timeline that goes.
It's already in our strategic plan that the board should be presented with the summer school plan. But I'm thinking this looks very bold, and so maybe you can update us as soon as possible and about how we're collaborating with the existing programs.
Well, I can absolutely. Did you want to say something? Okay, I can say that since we've given this to you, since we published this on Board Docs, we finalized the dates. So it's July 11th through August 4th. That's a Friday, 4th or 5th, one of those two. And so it's Monday through Friday, 4 weeks. Again, 9 to 3 o'clock. Every other program that we've done, if we've even done half days, it's been half days. And so that's, I think, will be more appealing to some of our families. We don't have to worry about childcare for the other half of the day. We have some ideas on how we can support that even further, but we're not there yet. I do think that, speaking of Horizons, they are going to be on our campuses as well. We are working, our social workers specifically are working to help identify students. There has to be that collaboration because those are our kids too. We have to make sure that we are supporting whichever program our students might end up in, because Horizons actually starts, I believe, 4 weeks prior to our summer school starting, or 3 weeks prior. And so we will have students who are participating in that program and Horizons, that we want to make sure that we're providing all the resources, all the supports, all the data that those teachers need, so they can also be meeting their kids and supporting their work. You're right. The gap is something we all need to be working on together.
So Ms. Bernardi, I just, if there are more specifics that you would like or as far as a plan, we can kind of get that information from you and bring that back.
Yeah, that would be great. I would appreciate it. I think everybody would. And they're all the same, they're all our students. So whoever we can help.
I would anticipate not to tell Dr. Early what to put in his Friday updates. But I would anticipate you probably get at least every other week, you get some updated information from us, not only about staffing, but also students, how many families we have interested, kind of what the next step plans are. But starting after the 4th of July holiday, the week after, gives everybody a chance, students and teachers, a chance to breathe a little. But it also buys us some additional time to make sure that we have the right people supporting our kids and that we have everybody in place that we need.
Sure.
Thank you. So looking at the last bullet, the focus, intentional focus on
Yes.
literacy and math, and then additional project base, I would just like to suggest some SEL components in there, like looking at the data where our needs are, anti-bullying, and hearing from parents that that's a big thing in elementary school across the district. So looking at that, how to self-regulate. And you mentioned social workers. Will we have social workers and counselors on hand, staff to handle mental health needs as well?
Our budget does include a counselor for this, and I believe we do have social workers who are available in the summer to work with this program.
Yeah, yes.
And I'll just add on Ms. Sharon about the SEL component, that you for sure can meet with Horizons because they have that as well. So I'm sure we can find some ways to work together.
And it actually, should have been listed in here, but we've used Second Step during summer school as well. It's really a lot of this is a jumpstart program. It's twice as long as, well, actually 4 times as long as it was last year. But it really is pre-teaching into next year's skills, and specifically around our literacy resources, curriculum, math, and social and SEL. Which SEL is, I mean, a lot of it's life skills. And so it's just helping our students know how to be successful in the school environment and life. Keep going.
I am.
Go ahead.
So with the launch, will we kind of do a big communication to kind of tell parents how to, you know, because if I'm not a high school parent, then I might not even know how. And so.
Absolutely. We have communication that, I mean, it will be going in spotlight, that's what I'm saying. But we also, last year, we had a power hour specifically around summer school.
Yeah.
And actually had Missy Sambo, who used to work with Berkwood. She is our launch liaison. And so she actually got in and did part of the webinar. I will say 2 things that, well, 3 things that even if you're not looking for the enrichment activities or the coursework for credit at the middle school level or at the high school level, there are what they have academies, academic academies in coding, reading, and math that really gives you access to adaptive software. And then there's also a small group and one-on-one instruction available to you. That's just good practice. It's good practice to keep kids engaged over the summer. I will also say that if your child has been identified as at risk for dyslexia in Kirkwood, then you qualify for a specific small group intervention through launch. It's a fantastic program that they work that is targeted just for students statewide who've been identified as at risk for dyslexia. And then this year, for the first time, they have academies that are offered at the elementary level and middle school level, I believe, for students who are identified as gifted. And so our kids who are in Reach and SOAR currently, there are, I believe it's 2nd grade and up, there are academies where you'll be in an online classroom with other kids who are gifted around the state.
Yeah, so I can just get in there.
Absolutely.
And then also, I just appreciate you picking this out as families are, you know, choosing. And I wonder if you just kind of put that out there to parents too, like save the date, you know, not even, you know, obviously we're having draft invitations, but if I'm a parent that doesn't know if Johnny's gonna, then I'm not gonna plan my vacation during that time or that kind of thing. So maybe we need to do kind of a broad.
Absolutely. Our goal is to have all this information on our website, and it's something out of the spotlight at the very least that directs them there, because nobody's going to read all the information in the spotlight that we're going to have on our website.
Yep, okay.
Absolutely. Keep going.
Yeah.
Middle school, we're talking 18 days. We're up from 28 hours last year to 63 hours this year. They are doing a Monday through Thursday program starting on July 7th and running through August 4th. I believe that's the time. I should have, I have it on one of my 1,000. Oh, here it is, August 4th. Oh, I posted it right in front of me. And so, yes, and so that is what we're looking at for middle school. We are trying to be creative there as well, trying to give people some options quickly for Algebra Jumpstart, because their online works for some people, but it may be better to do in person for some people as well. And so we're excited about adding more programming at that level. It will again be half day, but it's more days than we've had in years at the middle school level. And so that's exciting to us as well. We'll take more students than that if we can get them. But again, it's a combination of kids who will come and then having the staff to support them during that work. High school, this is going to look very similar to what it has looked like with credit recovery and credit enhancement. The one difference is, you may remember in previous years, pre-COVID, enhancement was often offered in person on campus. These are all now online, and they are offered through the Pioneer E-Learning Academy. These are Kirkwood teachers, Kirkwood curriculum in Schoology, And so it is taught online, and this is some of the money that we've invested, some of the ESSER funds that we've invested in getting these courses developed, so that students have flexibility, and so they can, if online is what works for them, then they can take it that way. And then launch, I already gave a commercial for that, and so, but it's here if anybody has any additional questions.
Launch is free, isn't it, Dr. King?
It is, well, it's not,
It's like for the parents, for the students.
for the students, for the district, all of our summer school programs, we are able to get reimbursement, some reimbursement from the state. And so, yes, it will not be, any student can take it at no cost to them. And for that matter, at the high school, if they wanted to take a course that is not one of the three that we're offering online through Berkeley Teachers and Pelham, then they can take other courses that way as well.
So the kids that participate in summer school or summer camp, they'll get an invitation. What are we basing that on? And if there are parents who feel their child can benefit and they get in, and then are we stuck in those numbers?
Are you talking at every
Elementary and middle.
at elementary and middle school? Obviously, our first invitations, we feel an obligation to try to support, basically invite the kids who are failing to meet the benchmarks in literacy. So that's where our first wave of invitations is coming. That doesn't mean that's where we stop. But our teachers know our kids, our counselors know our kids, our principals know our kids. And so the next wave is who are the kids who we think will benefit the most from additional learning time, for whatever the reason might be. And then I have no problem with a parent reaching out to a principal and saying, I recognize I might be on a wait list now, but will you keep me in mind if there's an opportunity? Because we really want to serve as many kids as we can. But ideally, we get to the point where we have lots and lots of kids that want to be served.
So if that number is like an elementary, the 300, did you say 80?
I just basically we looked at 40 to 60 kids per school. But if we keep going, I mean, we're going to be hosting the elementary program is going to be at Robinson again. And so they have close to 500 students at the school right now. And so if we need to go up to that high, as long as we have staffing for them and supports in place, then we will do what we can to make that.
And I think for Ms. Sherman, just to be very definitive, is if we have the staff, we won't turn students away.
Now, I should say we have 500 students there with much larger class sizes than 10 to 12. And so we have to be mindful of that. And we can have more kids in the class. We want to have that teacher-student ratio. So maybe there's 20 kids in a class that you adults, if we get to that point. You have to be tired of me at this point.
No, I just have one question too, actually. The middle school summer school program, I don't think I'm making this up, but I felt like last year there was like, in the years past, there was a summer school opportunity for kids that might be a little anxious about, so will we still be able to provide that kind of?
I would say, knowing our middle school principals, they're going to find a way to make that happen. That is typically, that's for our rising sixth graders. And so it's kind of around transitions. And so there's an academic portion of it, but it really is about getting to know your school.
Cool. Okay, so,
Yes.
okay. And then the other thing, I don't need an answer on, but I often hear of school districts doing like a kindergarten jumpstart. And I wonder, kind of like, should we be doing that or should we not? What are the benefits? And you don't have to answer now, but maybe that's something that.
I think it's something for study for sure.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
If I can just say, it's delightful to have over an hour of conversation around student learning.
Yeah, that's what we're here
Thank you very
for.
much for your questions. I do appreciate that, and thank you for your genuine care for this.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Lott.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Yeah, I know. Okay. go to the strategic plan dashboard.
All right, thank you very much. And I want to echo Dr. Painter's sentiment there. It is good to have a Board of Education that wants to sit and hear and listen and ask in-depth questions about our student data, especially as we move through this post-COVID era. So I do thank you for that. And related to that, if you'll recall, last summer when the board approved the strategic plan, one of the things that we had was a strategic plan dashboard. And so we weighted very specifically on the strategic plan dashboard to have comparative data, if that makes sense. And what I mean for that is to go from our our fall benchmarking to our winter benchmarking. And so we have been working over the last 6 weeks or so with HYA, with Dr. Nicastro, and invited Dr. Nicastro and a guest here this evening to walk the board through that. So if you're wondering why we did this afterwards, it's because it does include some of the data that we just showed the board, and we wanted to make sure the board saw that data before it was live and on our strategic plan dashboard that would go on our website.
And just real quick, board, I sent you a link you can get on YouTube as long as you mute. Then you can kind of follow along.
And so I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Nicastro, and I'll have you introduce our other guests.
Great, thank you so much. We're delighted to be with you this evening. My colleague Nancy Perez is
Okay.
Turn off her mic.
Dr. Nicastro, I think that you might have muted yourself.
sorry. Hi, good evening. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Yes, we're delighted to be here this evening. And as Dr. Ulrich said, this is a continuation of the work that we did last year when we worked with you on your strategic plan. And I have to say, just a commendation to the superintendent and to the board. Too many districts really do strategic planning and then don't follow through with that and don't take that seriously. Obviously, your district, certainly based on the last presentation that was just made by Dr. Painter, you all are very focused on the data, and it's just a pleasure to work with that kind of district. The strategic dashboard is something, and I'm going to ask Nancy to put that up for us. She can share her screen. It is an online tool that is designed primarily as a communication tool to your community. While you all as board members get the detailed reports such as that you just received about all the nitty-gritty of the action steps and the things that are happening, it's important to have some way of communicating key indicators to your community so that they know what those things are. So as we scroll down, this will be your home page. I'm sorry, Nancy, thanks. This home page shows your vision, your mission, your guiding principles, and your priority goal areas. So all of those basic elements of your strategic plan are put on that home page. The link to this will be placed on your website, and all the community has to do is click on that link, and then they'll be able to see those basic elements of your strategic plan. If they want to know more detail, they can go to the bottom of that page, and they can click on that link, which will take them directly to the complete strategic plan. So they'll have an opportunity to see that, and see all the specifics if they choose to do that. This strategic planning process, of course, was guided by your committee, and the various elements of that were created by that committee and presented to you last spring. If we go back to the home page, I think you can see this information, of course, is what your district has decided to put on your home page. We can customize this to show anything that you want to show. So if down the road, we want to add pictures or diagrams or charts or whatever you might want to add to that, we can certainly modify that. And that'll be something that might enhance your homepage. The important part of the dashboard really is found on the next page, which is the indicators. Now on this page, you can see the four core areas that your strategic plan identified. And those are, of course, relevant and rigorous curriculum, instruction and programs, equity, diversity and inclusion, social, mental and emotional health, and communication and engagement. Under each of those, there are a number of objectives. And I know you all have seen the annual plan that your administration put together, which is a very detailed plan showing essentially the actions that they plan to take and that they are taking to achieve each of those objectives. The purpose of this page is not necessarily to report on that specific data, but rather to do a high-level, quick indicator that communities can see as an indication of how well the strategic plan is going, how well key certain measures are being achieved. So for example, if you look at literacy proficiency, which is the first tile under relevant and rigorous curriculum, you can see that 72.9% of your K-8 students are currently scoring at or above literacy benchmarks. So your community can see, okay, that's where we are. Then if they click on the tile, it gives them more detailed information. This is much the same information that you just received from Dr. Painter. This particular chart is sorted by grade level, so you can see that, and testing period. And then the second chart is sorted by race. So you can keep, and I know one of you asked a question about the race achievement gap, and that data will be reported, and these kinds of charts will be available for the community to track. So if we go back to the second, you can see the second math proficiency is much the same, because two of the objectives under those major areas had to do with student performance. And obviously literacy and math are the main areas. Math proficiency, again, by grade level, and then also by race. Now, one of the things that came up in our strategic planning was some concerns or some interest in promoting additional opportunities for your students in career and technical programs, making sure that they were aware of those programs and possibly expanding those as well. So you can see right now, if we go to the chart on this third tile, you can see that the first chart talks about participation by race. This is one of the things that came up. It was at least mentioned a few times that they didn't feel like there was necessarily equitable participation in these programs by race. And so it's something that the district has chosen to show or demonstrate in an indicator so that the community can keep track of that if that's something that they find important. The second chart shows by gender. And I know this was also something that was mentioned during our strategic planning process, whether or not the females felt that they had access to or that they took advantage of access to, or if there was something that needed to be looked at in that respect. And so this chart demonstrates that. So this kind of demonstrates for you how the indicators page works on the strategic dashboard. And the same thing is true for equity, diversity, and inclusion. So you have two tiles there, one that demonstrates honors course participation by race. Again, that's something that was mentioned previously, so that's something we put in here. None of this, of course, has to do with the administrative plan that your administrators have created. This is not about how you get there. This is about picking what are those big rocks, if you will, that you want to make sure that you're attacking, those big pieces that you want your community to know that you're doing something about, and to be very transparent about it. This is primarily a communication tool to make sure that you're communicating the major work and the key points of interest to your community. And then the second chart talks about total percent of student body involved in advanced, or I'm sorry, career and technical programs. Same thing is true for all of these. And when your strategic dashboard is posted on your website, I think that's going to happen sometime very soon. Each of these tiles has additional information that, and I'm not going to take time. I know you all have a very lengthy board meeting, but I'm not going to take time to go through each and every one of these tonight. But there's similar kinds of charts showing participation in advanced and honors courses by race, for example, because that's, again, something else that your community mentioned. And then total participation in advanced enrichment programs. We also have staff diversity, something that was brought up, looking at the diversity of your staff over time, so that you can keep track of and communicate to your constituents how you're doing in those areas. Under social, mental, and emotional health, and I know recently you had a very lengthy presentation about social, mental, and emotional health, and the survey that you've been using, the panorama, survey that you give to your folks, and that data is reflected here in these tiles. Again, by race, by grade level, so forth. And then finally, of course, communication and engagement. So in this particular one, the tiles that we've chosen to put on here right now are the total number of clicks you've had or visits you've had to your website, the results of the community survey and what your community said about your effectiveness of your communication, and then finally your financial dashboard. And if you go to the financial dashboard indicator or tile, you'll see that there you visit the site, and I think Nancy, you have to go, yeah, you have to go back. There we go. And that is, they click for the financial dashboard that I know you all are familiar with. So that kind of is a very quick overview of what is really meant to be an introduction to your dashboard. The good thing about this is it can be customized and it can be updated as frequently as you choose or as you have data. And it can also be modified to add additional indicators, additional tiles as we go through. So I think that I know that one of the things I'll be doing is working with your administration to really fine tune these measures and make sure that we have the right indicators to really give that high level viewpoint to your school district. Most of your constituents don't have the opportunity or the time to review the kind of presentation that you just saw from Dr. Painter. So the purpose of this dashboard is to say to them, here's the high level data, here's the important and very few salient points that we want you to know about how we're doing on the strategic plan that the Board of Education approved. It's one way that you can be transparent about your progress, show them all the places that you're succeeding and the few places that you may not be doing as well as you would like. And then in your action plans, you talk about what it is you're doing to address those areas that aren't meeting your standards. We will be adding some additional indicators, and we also will be adding, and you can see at the top left of that page, there's another page that is available to you called strategies. And on that page, we will be, right now we've started working on filling in your strategies. These are things that correlate somewhat to your annual plan. And we'll be working with your administration to flesh that out a little more. So I would just say to you, this is an evolving tool of communication that we're happy to provide to your community, and looking forward to continuing to work with your staff.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. DeCastro, Nancy, for your work. This is very exciting. This is a work in progress. It will continue to evolve as our plan evolves. But as you have indicated, we have chosen some of the, I think you call them the big rocks that we know and will follow throughout the year. So again, as I told the board, we waited specifically for it this evening because we do have comparative data to show where our students are. Each time we get new data, we will update it. And we will make sure that each of the indicators is that we are following is we are moving in the direction that we are hoping. So again, Dr. Castro, thank you very much. It's good to have this as kind of the next phase of our communication and our transparency, specifically surrounding the strategic plan and the work that we're doing to achieve those objectives. Ms. Andrews?
Thank you so much.
Okay, and board members at this time, are there any questions? Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. DeCastro, for doing this work. And board members, I need a motion in a second to extend our meeting. Yes, for 30 minutes.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of extending, please raise your right hand. Okay. All those opposed? Motion passes. You got that? I got it. Right. Okay. They've been wanting to do that to me all year. Okay. So moving on now to our update. We have a special guest, Craig from Navigate and Mr. Romay. Come on up. Yep. Thank you so much, Craig, for sitting through this. Yeah, we should have adjusted the summary. Okay, Mr. Romay.
Yes, thanks. I'd like to welcome Craig Sluter from Navigate Building Solutions. They serve as our construction management firm. They serve as an agent for the school district. They're helping us with during the design phase of our construction, the bidding phase, and then also with the actual construction itself. So Craig's going to give an update on some past projects that have been completed, projects that are in the process right now, and then some bidding concerns that he's going to discuss.
Great. Good evening. I am a Kirkwood School District parent, so I appreciate all the presentations. So at least it resonates because I'm in the community. But yeah, echo what Mike said, I'm going to start off with doing a recap of the ground we've covered so far with Prop R. Today we've had 3 successful bids. We had the 2 ramps for Robinson and Kaiser. We had a bid for Westchester Early Edition. And then late last winter, we had the bid for North Glendale, Robinson, Kaiser, and Kirkwood Early Childhood Center renovations that are happening summer of 22. So all those bids aggregately came up under budget. In addition, the ramps projects, the construction project was completed. We had 2 ribbon cuttings for each one of those schools. The Westchester Early Edition, we just got our certificate of occupancy last Friday. So we have a ribbon cutting tomorrow morning. So we're excited about that. So a lot of good things have happened to date. Last week, we had a bid opening for the bid package for North Kirkwood Middle, Kniford, and the high school project. We unfortunately just received 1 bid. And that's unusual because we had 5 committed bidders that were said that they were going to bid it up to a few days before that bid. We've been doing a lot of market research and talking with the various bidders and contractors. And the reason we've heard is that a lot of it has to do with the market conditions. There's a tremendous amount of construction work going on. There's labor challenges that we keep hearing about in the news, and that's causing a lot of contractors to not be able to bid on the projects and be more and more selective. In addition, the inflation and supply chain challenges are affecting material prices and deliveries. So there are a lot of challenges there that are affecting the construction bid environment. So all these are affected the bid. Our plan will be to review the bid requirements and make edits as necessary, because we want to make sure that this bid, when we go out to bid again for that bid package, is as attractive as possible to that community, to encourage contractors and contractors to bid that. We'll put that package back out to bid within the next week or so. We'll accept bids on April 19th. So that's it for that package. Lastly, I'll say that the Westchester and Tillman bid package are out to bid. Bids are due on April 7th. So the goal is those two last bid packages that have to do with our education spaces will bring to the board on April 25th. That's my update.
Thank you so much, Craig. And board members, at this time, do you have any questions? Okay. Seeing no seeing no questions, I just want to take the time to thank you for your due diligence and Mr. Romay, and just to say to our community that, you know, continue to look for updates with regards to this. And we will continue to bring you along in a transparent manner as we have. Okay. Dr. Ulrich, do you have anything else to say about that?
No, just thank you very much for both of you being here this evening. And like I said, or like you said, Ms. Andrews, our commitment is to be transparent and to fulfill our commitment also to add capacity to our schools, and that will be done.
Okay. Craig, you are free. We know that you're a parent, but you do not have to wait any longer. Okay. Okay, I need a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items for March 14th as presented.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes. Next on Mr. Romay, this is where I always go off the rails. Okay, I need a motion and then a second to approve the February 2022 financial statement as presented.
Second.
Okay, and at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Romay, and then I will ask for any questions.
Great, thank you. Our revenues in February were operating revenues were 2.1 million. That consists of current taxes of 800,000, Prop C revenues 603,000, state revenues 428, and then federal revenue is 125,000. One thing I did want to point out about Prop C revenues, we are on track to receive about $1 million more than what was budgeted. Prop C is a sales tax, so as the economy is going the way it's going and inflation, it's adding to the Prop C sales tax revenue that we're receiving. So that's why we're expecting more money this year and again next year, but that's the same. Update on some grants. We received a Missouri Department of Health grant of $600,000. These funds must be used for COVID testing. And unless they extend the deadline, it has to be used by June 30th of 22. So we've begun testing, as you know, we're doing it in our schools and at the Turner building. We applied for the maximum amount, $600,000. We're not going to need all of that. There just hasn't been that much demand for the testing. Pcf Funding, we received a $940,000 grant to be used to purchase laptops to replace the ones that were purchased in 2017. So that's part of the Apple lease package that was recently approved. So we will receive that funding once we receive those laptops sometime in May. And then finally, ARP or ESSER funds, it's an American Rescue Plan funds. So for this year, our allocation is $1.4 million. We presented a plan to use those funds over the next 3 years. We presented that to the board in August. And so those funds will be used according to that plan. In February, our operating expenditures were $6.1 million, most of that being salaries and benefits. In our Prop I fund, we pay 2.3 million in principal and 165,000 in interest. This is on the 2013 and 2014 leasehold revenue bonds. In our debt service fund, we pay 3.1 million in principal and 1.4 million in interest. And that's on the Prop R bonds from 2021 and then the Prop 1 bonds from 2010. And this was the final principal payment on those bonds. In our construction fund, we paid $1.2 million in construction expense during the month of February. 639,000 was for professional services. 485,000 was for the Westchester Phase 1 2-classroom addition. 29,000 for the North Glendale Secure Vestibule and $5,000 toward the Essex Security Office.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Romay. Are there any questions? Seeing no questions, I'm going to move to a vote. All those in favor of approving the financials for February 2022, please raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Okay, thank you, Mr. Romay. Thank you. Okay, next up, lodging policy. As you guys know, we have a policy committee, and Ms. Bernardi and I serve on that policy committee. And what we have started to do is all our policies are, by letter. And so we have taken letters and like all the A policies, all the B policies, and all the C policies, and gone through all of those policies. So Ms. Bernardi is going to go through some of the changes. I do want to remind you all that if you have something with any of these policies, please give feedback to Ms. Bernardi and I. If we don't hear feedback, they will go in consent agenda for the next time. Another thing that Ms. Bernardi and I talked about was that before our next policy meeting, we will send out an email to you all to tell you what letters we're going to be looking at. And we would just ask that you look over those policies and give us any feedback so that we can represent your voice in the policy. I'd like to thank Ms. Heidenreich for her work with this, because she has done a fabulous job of just kind of helping us along with this policy work. And at this time, I will turn it over to Ms. Bernardi, my fellow policy.
Okay, I know you're excited to hear this. I'm just going to hit the high points for it. The first one is ADF, it's the District Wellness Program. And the only change in this one is to change the coordinator to the Assistant Superintendent of Student Services instead of Finance. So that's an easy one. The ADF AP1 procedure is District Wellness Program. I want to thank Dr. Bailey for his work on this. And it's been revised just to comply with federal regulations. The major changes are about standards for food and beverages provided but not sold to students. And then there are other issues with wellness that are in our wellness plan that you can refer to. Policy AH is use of tobacco and vaping products. This has been significantly modified due to House Bill 1682. And you can see the changes in this. They're pretty self-explanatory. The next policy is policy BCB. And this is more interesting because it has to do with board officers and the election of board officers. And this policy also lists all the duties of the board president, which you may want to review. And what the change is that we shall elect a president and a vice president at our upcoming organizational meeting. So that is a change. And the other change is the addition of receiving and acknowledging community correspondence to the board, except as otherwise delegated. So the president will also have that duty as well. So if we're only electing 2 officers, then we have to look at the next policy. So that is BCC1, and those are appointed board officials. So you might ask, can a district employee hold an office? And the answer is yes. because MSBA encourages districts to appoint the person who actually does all the work required of these positions, usually the superintendent's administrative assistant, to the position of secretary. And then, of course, we all know that Mr. O'May, who does all the work, is the treasurer for the district. So this policy says that the board shall elect a secretary and treasurer on or before July 15th of each year. So this is a change, and there's a few other changes that you might want to review as you consider these, and then you can give some feedback. There's also a procedure if you want to add one of those. The next one's easy. It's BCG, School Attorney Legal Services. Just says we have to submit a request for a quote for legal services at least every 5 years. We've just done that, so we're good for 5 more years. And the next one is BDA board meetings. And this one, the proposal is to remove the 2-hour time limit to our board meetings, so they can go on forever. No, I'm just kidding. But you will not have to extend the time. So actually, that's a good idea, because that way we don't have to keep looking at the time and extending it. Just get to the matter. But I'm sure that everyone will still be respectful of the time, and hopefully they'll be even shorter. The other change is the board will hold its regular meetings, since we never know where our boardroom is lately, as specified in the publicized notice of the meeting. So you can be sure and find out where the meeting is if you look online. So that's the big change there. You guys really need to read these. Are you paying attention? There's a lot of good stuff there. Okay, last one.
Really through for money.
Yes, this is really exciting about my policy. Cgdl, release of information. So this is a good one because it did say the custodian of records was the superintendent of schools, and now it has been delegated to the executive assistant to the superintendent, which she seems to be having a lot of work from these topics. And that's all I have. So those will be lodged tonight. And then, of course, they're pending your approval and also your comment, and so they're up for grabs if you want to change anything.
So at this time, board members, I can see Mark jumping in.
Mr. Boyko, would you like to say
Mr.
something?
Boyko.
Yeah, so 2 of them, obviously on the time limit, what is the rationale behind limiting that?
On what? The time? Oh, the time? You know, the reason for that is most boards don't have a time limit. They just do what they do. So we don't know why we had a time limit in there or why we would have to extend. And, you know, sometimes we just do things and there's just not a reason why. But upon my surveying of other boards, there's not normally a time limit.
And then my other question on the secretary thing, I'm confused. Are we still electing under this plan a secretary from among the board, and then just many of the duties are being delegated, or are we no longer electing a board member to be secretary?
Correct. If we, as read, as presented, these policies, we would not elect a board secretary. We would appoint the administrative assistant to the superintendent to be our board secretary, because that is the person who does all the work. And as MSBA recommends, why not just have that person be the secretary? There's no conflict with confidentiality because she knows that it's confidential. And as a matter of fact, I think it's a good deal for us board members. Yeah.
Okay, so I will think about that at a later point on whether or not that makes sense. But if we are not selecting a board member to be secretary, then the duties of the secretary should not include presiding over the meeting when the president and vice president are asked.
Right, that is just to take notes. So that's how it's listed in the form that we have, but we can always adjust. But that's just to take notes. But the president or vice president will always.
Okay, but it says preside over the meeting, so
Right.
that's not just take notes.
But we think Mark.
You know, we should probably call our meeting. Mr. Boyko, so yes, please, mark that up and send it
Yes,
away.
yes. The other thing that you can do is if there is a time that we need a board member, this type, right, what is it called? Where you can appoint someone. We could nominate the secretary.
Yeah, there's a provision for that. We can add it too. We always have this.
Yeah, this is a first reading, and board members, please send all your feedback to Ms. Benoni and myself. And
When do you need comments by?
we said we needed comments by the Friday before next board meeting, correct? The Friday before, so it's actually, so it's April, what is the date that?
But there's, yeah, so, yeah, we should, if we want to pass that at the next meeting, then if you want to get your comments in sometime before the next meeting, that would be great.
But they need to be in by April 1st, April Fool's. So send us all kinds of fun stuff, guys.
I would recommend that we copy all of us on our comments so that it just makes life easier.
Yep.
And we might have to separate a couple of those and vote on outside of the consent.
Yeah.
We can do that. And so
Sure, we can do whatever we want.
We're to vote something and
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to
So-
send them all to me, I'll summarize them and send them out to everybody else. Okay.
No, I think what we've got to do is copy the entire one. So if you're sending comments, copy the entire one. Okay. Moving on to future events. So we have spring recess, March 21st through the 25th. We have a staff development day on March 28th. March 29th, school resumes. On April 14th, our 4th, please note that an additional meeting has been added. I know, right? April 4th, an additional meeting has been added. April 5th, we have school board election. April 18th, we have a board reorganization and regular meeting. I asked to add the April 4th meeting because how spring break fell and everything else, we were gonna go a whole month and we have stuff that we have to get done within that time. So normally we would have had that meeting on the day before an election. So as I looked at the calendar, I added it.
Do we have a board retreat on March 31st?
Yes. Oh, yeah, no, all right. Okay. And as we did not complete closed session earlier on board, we need a motion and a second, a motion to return to closed session for the purposes of legal 610, 0.021 subsection 1, personnel 610.021 subsection 3 and 13, negotiation 610. You two be quiet over there. 021, subsection 9. Then competitive bidding specification 610.021, subsection 11, and public safety 610.021, subsection 18 by roll call vote. Ms. Pangborn? Boyko, Mr. Boyko?
Yes.
Mr. Frost?
Yes.
Ms. Shern? Mr. Kavanaugh?
No.
Yeah.
Myself, yes. Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for hanging with us. Now we're gonna go spend the rest of our evening